some pearls of wisdom and some great insight from the conversation today. I have the honor and privilege of having Mr. Yogi Sriram on the panel, and today I'm happy to say that I'm not going to be too much of talking. I'm going to just be the question quiz master, and Sir is going to take over and walk us through all the insights on the session. One of the things that I wanted to mention as we get started, we will be focusing not just on some, but also generally in terms of what mentoring is. And at the end of the session, we'll keep 20 minutes for any question answers that you might have. So please do put your questions in the chat box when we open it up for all of you. And if you have anything that you want us to talk about at that stage, please do that. Let me quickly introduce Mr. Sriram to you for very few people who might not know about him. He's been a HR leader for the last 44 years and is right now an advisor to the CEO and MD at Larsen and Toubro. And in his span of 44 years, he's pretty much played every role in terms of guiding teams on HR planning, HR strategy, succession planning, leadership development, working with high potentials. And again, he's worked across an array of industries in industrials, and I will look at my notes here: engineering, construction, hydrocarbon, power, FMCG, and hospitality industry. His list of achievements is really, really long, and I can spend the next 20 minutes talking about it. But very, very quickly, I think some of the key things that he's passionate about is mentoring new leaders and creating the right impact in the HR industry, and making sure that a lot of new age thinking, a lot of new age thought around HR and how the HR industry per se should grow, goes out and is shared with the young and upcoming leaders in HR and in the larger industry. Some of the accomplishments, and again, there are quite a few. I'm going to list out the ones that are top of the list. He was felicitated last year with Lifetime Achievement Award at the Economic Times Human Capital Awards. And this was in November of 2021. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And then again, he was admitted into the Hall of Fame. That's an award instituted by Dr. Vikram Sarabhai in the memory of Dr. Vikram Sarabhai. And this is instituted by Postima Business School, which was set up by some of the alums from IIM Ahmedabad. So again, a lot of other, awards like Human Elevation for being outstanding contributor to the country as an iconic HR leader, Lifetime Achievement by the HR fraternity, at ISTD at Calcutta, and so on. So again, like I said, the list is longer than what we can fix in today, but please know that you're in very, very sound hands today, and it's going to be a wonderful 1 hour of conversation. So with that, let me get started with our session today, which is really on essentials of mentoring. I think one of the things that I've realized out of my shorter span as compared to Sir of 24 years is that mentoring is one of the most underrated aspects of our career or of our journey. Even when one talks about getting mentored by someone, or when we look at ourselves as leaders and when we have to mentor others, I think it's a very, very underrated concept where most of us do not understand the real value that comes out of working with a good mentor or being a good mentor and adding value to somebody else. And if you see most of the global leaders, whether it's organizations, sporting icons, people in the fashion industry, musicians, the one thing which is very distinctive and stands out for all of them is that they've had some great mentors who worked with them, helped them become the successful people that they are. And to me, the one example which is very close and I use very, very regularly is about Sachin Tendulkar, who would have ended up becoming a fast bowler had Ramakant Achrekar, his mentor, not given him the right mentoring and coaching, and made him into the best batsman we've seen in the world. And to me, that's a story which is very, very close, and something that resonates with me, that if you did not have good mentors, many of us would not be at the path where we are. So with that, let me just jump into some of the questions. So Yogi, so the first thing that I want to understand, and at the heart of it, what is mentoring really for? I mean, what does it really do for us?
Thanks, Rakhee, for the very generous introduction, first of all. The reason why mentoring has been kind of fuzzy, just to pick some words up from your intro, is that horizontally and vertically, it's kind of amorphous. If you take horizontally, there are many purposes of mentoring. Of course, I know that this afternoon, we probably want to zero into leadership mentoring. But there could be institutional mentoring. It's common nowadays for a large older IIM to mentor an infant IIM, an older IIT to mentor an infant IIT, and so on and so forth. There are now 20 IIMs, one in the pipeline, and 15 or 16 IITs, I don't remember. So they all need mentoring, and they're mentored as an institution. The second type of mentoring is peer mentoring, which happens between peers. The third is, I'm not going by serial number of importance, is reverse mentoring, where younger people are supposed to be mentoring slightly older people, the sub-40s with the people who are more than 40 or whatever. And then there is the classical mentoring, which is leadership mentoring. I think this afternoon we probably will restrict our conversation to leadership mentoring. And in leadership mentoring, if we further zero into it, there is high potential mentoring, which companies keep talking about, because when you are selected and companies want to invest in a person in terms of development and so on. And then there is leadership mentoring, which is a little more inclusive. So mentoring is a process where, in my opinion, in my definition, where there is a mentor and a mentee. There is a basic relationship of trust, and we'll go in deeper there. But it is something that infuses self-confidence in the mentee. It inspires mutual growth. It's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street, because both ways you can learn. I'm doing some extensive mentoring for one of our listed companies, and I can tell you I'm learning quite a bit also on the trot. There's a lot of adult learning that happens. I'm distinguishing that from passing it through the tunnel of just mutual learning. Adult learning means you learn to learn, which is a different phase in life. And basically, mentoring is for development. You don't keep, report cards on mentoring and, feed it back for administrative purposes. Normally, the confidentiality of mentoring should be respected. And it can be as profound as a life-changing kind of a, experience. Adults change with difficulty. You and I would also change only if there's a very serious tipping point. There's some life-changing event in our families or in our lives or in our corporate, career and so on. It's not easy to change. But mentoring is a little longer than just one big bang life-changing event. It's a gradual process where you hold up a mirror. And of course, there are different techniques of mentoring and so on. So mentoring essentially is investment in talent management, in companies, and leadership behaviors, very important. Leadership behaviors, molding them so that you have a common corporate culture, which is a aggregation of all the behaviors practiced by all the employees, is very important as a competitive advantage.
I completely agree with you, Yogi sir, and I think it's a lot of our mentoring behaviors are really top down. If you think about it, organizations that are successful in terms of creating leaders faster and fostering great people orientation are typically those where there is a lot of top down mentoring culture, where there is a lot of learning by apprenticeship which is happening. So I completely agree with you that it's something which needs to really percolate at the leadership level, go down, and that also kind of then creates the environment, the culture where everybody wants to mentor and wants to make somebody else very, very successful. So
the genesis of mentoring actually is, this must have been covered sometime in some theory class and so on. But it's interesting because it started off in this in Greek mythology by the Greek poet Homer in the works called Odyssey.
Right.
And I understand from what you read in the Wikipedia and so on that he was keen that his son Telemachus has a proper mentor, and therefore he approached a family friend who would be the mentor to Telemachus. So it took the shape of a friend, guide, and philosopher, and so on. So that's why I said in the beginning, the horizontal definition of mentorship is very, very wide. And when you take the vertical, you can yo-yo from reverse to top down. Please go ahead.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when you were talking about Homer, I was also very quickly reminded about how even in the Indian mythology, the concept of mentors has always been there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we could call it differently and say, it's a guru shishya parampara, but actually a lot of the mentoring that you see happening, in the, Vedas and a lot of our mythology, there are mentions of, these great mentors who were not necessarily the most educated or higher ranking folks. So I understand where you're coming from. So this is not something which is new. It's just a word that.
Except that I'm a little careful about not talking about examples of Arjun and Krishna and so on.
Yes.
Because I want this conversation to be culture free, number one.
True.
And number two, I sometimes think that it's very difficult to translate English words and what they mean into the vernacular. For example, if you take a word like judgment and quickly type in Wikipedia or in Google, what's the translation? You'll get nirnay. Nirnay is not judgment, it's a decision.
Right.
And I'm not an expert on the Gita, but I do presume that there is a certain amount of advising also that goes on there, which is not mentoring.
Yeah.
Mentoring, in my definition at least, is questioning, helping the other person through artful questions to face what he or she may be thinking is a hostile world, or rising to a level where the person can tackle the problem. Not beyond that. So we'll more about that little later.
Sure, absolutely. So just
and by the way, one disclaimer, anyone can disagree with me, it's because people are very passionate about all these beliefs and so on. I'm not the authority on Hindu mythology, but just a thought.
Yeah. And that's why I said Indian mythology and not Hindu mythology, because, that's suspect and, people have strong opinions about it. And so just continuing on that chain of thought, where you're talking about what mentoring really is, what do you think distinguishes or from somebody who is actually supervising you or just having a task-oriented conversation? If you were to talk about what mentoring is, then how would you kind of state it, or is there something which tells you that, yes, now I'm being mentored?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's nice to visit what mentoring is not. Because I've noticed in many conversations that the natural tendency, particularly in our country, is to advise. So mentoring is not about advising at all. The minute you advise, there's a breakdown in the developmental process. And because you're in a position of power, even if it is short-lived and artificial in terms of being appointed or being accepted as a mentor, one should desist from that. The second is this kind of a trap that I can help in every situation. You can ask questions, you can get into a sense of inquiry, but it is not possible to help in every situation. Maybe 50% of the time you may succeed in the process. 50% of the time you may just coast along, and as long as it doesn't become worse, it's fine. The second part of what is not mentoring is the personal belief or the paradigm that mujhe sab kuch malum hai. I know the best. You may not know the best at all, because when you refer back to, like a broken record, I'm sorry, I'm being slightly sarcastic here. about जब मैं छोटा था, जब मैं आपके उम्र था 24 साल का, मैं ये करता था, is no more relevant. That is not mentoring. My experience when I passed out of TISS in 1977 is anecdotal. And if I try to download that on Rakhee, she might quietly say, what's this guy talking about here? We're talking about analytics. We're talking about stuff which is totally different, you know. He's talking about some outdated stuff which is, you know, part of history. The third one is that in your career, I can help you go ahead. Promotion ho jayega. Aapka career chamkega. Not at all. That is not our job. We are not in the game of, is that an ABBA song? Ra Ra Rasputin. Ra Ra Rasputin means what? I'm all powerful, you know. I'm Rasputin, I think was a king or something like that, of some sort. Or Boney M. Sorry, my wife is yelling from that side saying it's Boney M. So we are not the Rasputin types. Huh? And the last one, what is mentoring is not, is you need me, you know, without me, what will you do? That's a sense of false grandiose. It's incidental that there's a conspiracy of fate that both of us are together or have been appointed to be together because in good faith, I'm here trying to help you. And in the process, learning a lot myself. So mentoring is actually helping that person to grow from point X to point Y through a process of inquiry and searching and looking in the mirror, and not producing ready-made solutions that are contextually relevant to the mentor and not to the mentee at all. I'll be short in my answers. I don't know whether this is short, so that more questions could be asked.
You should take your time. I think a lot of questions get answered when you give context and you bring in your insights. So please take whatever time you need to answer. No stress on the time from my side. The other thing I wanted to check with you was, do you think there is
one of your colleagues should keep an eye on all the chat box questions which are popping up, because I can't do both together.
No, that's not even required. We'll take up the questions as we enter into the last segment. And yes, thank you, Devi. This was the next question I was going to pose to Sir. Is there a fundamental difference between mentoring and coaching, or are these synonyms, just different labels?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about the classical differences that one normally talks about. Coaching is supposed to be a little more task oriented, in the sense that you have a definite goal with respect to how should I be more respectful or come out as more respectful to people, right from the tea boy who serves me tea, or my junior, how do I make that person sit down, how do I view juniors, etc. So it's a self-reflection on that. Mentoring is much more of a safe environment where people are given space to talk about their worst fears, their apprehensions. My personal technique, which I'll talk about a little later, is I go through the life journey and try to cull out things from the life journey with the respondent. Coaching, I think, is a little more short term. You have coaching contracts and you have maybe 3, 4, 5. It's enormously more expensive because I presume I haven't heard of mentors who are professional that way. I've heard more of mentoring being done pro bono or being done from one company to another or within the company and so on. It's normally more long term because it's probably spread over 3, 4 years and so on. It is performance driven coaching, whereas mentoring is more developmental driven. You normally in coaching, you don't have any specific design as such. You do a freewheeling kind of thing. In mentoring, you normally come out with a design, you come out with expectations and so on. Coaching is more about having a goal. I don't know whether the process is designed as such. In coaching, the immediate manager is often a very important partner with the coach, or at least is In the case of mentoring, is indirectly involved, may not be involved all the time, because in coaching, it's important to get rid of a blemish or become even better for the purpose of organizational performance. If you ask me, I wouldn't be stuck with the nuances. There's a lot of similarities, which is more. The similarities are more important than the differences.
Right, right. I completely agree. So let me ask you a tricky question, and this is something that I get asked quite a lot, and this is one of the things that I struggled with when I initially started my mentoring. Your mentee approaches you, and it's a regular day. You've already had a long day. You're also stressed out, and he walks up to you or she walks up to you and says, you know what, we need to talk. I haven't got promoted again. And that's the single line content of what the conversation is going to be about. And this is a very, very crucial conversation. This is a very difficult conversation, depending on how prepared you are or are not as a mentor. So I'm sure a lot of our audience wants to know and understand, how do you deal with conversations like these as a mentor?
My personal bias is through the route of counseling. I have been trained in non-directive counseling, in what is called as the Kharkov model, which is based on Carl Rogers' non-directive counseling. So therefore, if others have different ways, I might be forgiven for sticking to only one way. I stick to only this way. So let's say, Rakhee, you are my boss, and I'm that mentee who comes to you most disappointed, wringing my hands, and sitting down in front of you. Normally, the responses could be any of these four. One could be, you're the boss, you're also my mentor. Don't worry, we will see 6 months later or 1 year later. The second could be, oh, which batch do you belong to? Oh God, what sort of qualifications do you have? Who are the others from which other departments who got promoted and you got overlooked? I'm going to take this up. The third could be, God, you didn't get promoted. You know what? Even I'm miserable. Even I didn't get promoted. Look at this company. And the fourth could be, I want to understand how you feel and why you feel. Now, there are ranges of responses which start from advising, which is I'll see 6 months later, we'll see 1 year later, don't worry, sab kuch theek ho jayega type of thing. The second is the probing one, where you're probing to see which batch, what have you done, what are the achievements, which are the other department guys who got promoted. The third is, of course, where both of you need a mentor together, because you're saying that, I too haven't got promoted and this is bad. This is a COVID year and the company has been cruel to all of us. And the fourth is the most important part in our mentoring process. It's called the understanding response. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why it's not used also. In corporate world, the lexicon of language that we have with respect to feeling words is very limited. We're somehow supposed to be in a much more feelingless, non-sensitive, macho, and a P&L world where let's get on with it, And anything to do with feeling is seen as touchy-feely and weak, and all kinds of funny words are used for it. So I think it's very important for good mentors to develop a dictionary of feeling words, because in the mentoring process, the key to getting into the psychological drawing room of the other person's mind, the key. In French, the concierge who stands at the hotel entrance, who tells you about what's happening in the city, has 2 keys stuck on his black coat called clés d'ors. So that's the keys to the city. So the keys to the drawing room, or the clés d'ors to the drawing room, is the feeling word. Because when you use the feeling word, you are asking the person to talk about a feeling where the person is feeling intensely when the person walks up to you and sits down and says, I haven't got promoted again. So therefore, once you use the feeling word and entered the frame of reference, then you have permission and entry, so to say, to get into the paradigm of the other person. And an understanding response is much more important here than a bland, oh, don't worry, you'll be fine. Other people also, slow and steady wins the race. So and so failed so many times. This is all gyan which the person is not looking for at that time. So the feeling word is very, very important to latch on to at that moment.
I think it's an excellent point that you've made, Sashi, and I made a note of it, right? Dictionary of feeling. I think you've hit the nail on the head that anything which has to do with feelings, with emotions, is something which is completely brushed under the carpet. And the reason we are uncomfortable having some of these conversations, and they become difficult conversations, is because we don't know how to deal with this part of the conversation of how to address somebody who's feeling emotionally exhausted or is in a different state of emotions as where we are. And I think this is a great tip for anybody who wants to take up mentoring as a role, or is a mentor even at this point of time, to just get into, like you said, the drawing room of the other person's mind, to understand what state of feeling the other individual is in, because only once they are at a point where they're calm enough to have a conversation can you actually have a conversation. Before that, trying to bring in any facts or talk about, like you said, it's a bland conversation because it's all fact based. That conversation will add no value whatsoever. So thank you for that. So I think it's a very, very important point, and we don't talk about it a lot. So when we talk about this conversation, I'm also thinking, is the relationship that the mentor and the mentee have, um, does that have a huge impact in terms of how this conversation or any other conversation would turn out?
Yeah. So the relationship in terms of chemistry is extremely important, and chemistry can be built. I think consciously a mentor should be a person who's looking for people to interact with who have divergent opinions. It's very comfortable to have, as you get into adult life and become more and more successful, like-minded people who agree with what you say. But whether you're debating the movie Kashmir Files or whatever it is, you can have divergent views. And I think it's very important to listen to those views and get into the habit of respecting different views. And that is the beginning of building an interpersonal chemistry. The relationship is underscored by some characteristics of mentorship. One is mentorship is a partnership. It is not just it's a dyadic relationship where two people enter into a partnership to develop, and one develops, the other develops in the process too. There is authenticity, there is genuineness, there is empathy, there is a huge amount of confidentiality and trust. It's disastrous if a mentor takes notes quietly and discloses them to, where they need not be disclosed for administrative decisions, and hence a sense of power, saying, you know what, this guy is this. That's not done at all. So there's a huge amount of ethics involved also in mentoring. And sometimes in mentoring conversations, you give more than you get quite often. You got to have that generosity. Maybe you've chalked it out for 1.5 hours. Many times it spills over in my case. I'm mentoring people in the US and so on. I'm feeling sleepy. Somebody who's in San Jose, you have to mentor that person at something like his or her morning is my late in the evening. And I think the art of making self-disclosures without showing off and without getting into a long kahani about what you did and accomplished and so on, but nuggets of what you did and failed, what you learned, are all very important in this relationship building. You're not invulnerable as a mentor. You've stumbled, you failed, you fell down, you got up. And your ability to capsule those. And by the way, there could be multiple mentors in different phases of life also. I mean, you could have domain mentors, talking about reverse mentoring, it's more often than not domain oriented, but more of that little later. For example, if I'm, let's say, wanting to learn about a trading platform, I may get stuck somewhere, in the trading platform about how to see my trade book and all that stuff. So I ring up a younger person and the person navigates me. That's a good example of reverse mentoring. So there could be lots more to it. But basically, the relationship is based on trust, based on giving and taking, mutual learning. Mutual learning is very, very important. And co-creating an agenda and co-creating learning. In which case, I would say that a mentor who is serious about this craft must learn about social psychology experiments and also learning and development theorists who have contributed to the theory of learning and development. And notably, including HR folks who are listening to me right today, might want to put their hands on the work of Jean Lave, who's talked about something called situated learning, which is an excellent piece of research. And of course, the age-old Zygarnik, which is another interesting piece. There could be many more. So it's useful to try and relate to those, L&D theories and not dismiss them as soon as one comes out of Excel or TIS or wherever and say, wo sab to theory hai, bhul jane chahiye. That's a very wrong attitude. So if HR people are getting into mentoring, please do that. If the line people getting into mentoring, please, there's plenty of TED Talks, literature, books, etc. And you can give a bit of a competition to your HR people by learning about these.
Right. No, I think that's those are some very good things that one can learn and also share as mentors with other people that we are mentoring, especially in the HR fraternity. I definitely think that some of the folks in HR would learn quite a bit if they go through some of these experiments. So thank you for sharing that, sir. So and I cannot help but ask you this because you have so much experience in this. Is there a specific technique? Is there a aid or a map that you use when you're mentoring? Because I'd be very interested in understanding what you use.
In my case, I spend about an hour and a half with each mentee on the life journey. I have the habit of writing furious notes or furiously writing those notes, not furious notes, sorry, furiously writing those notes. I have books and books of my diary. I write with an old fountain pen, which was given to me when I passed out of higher secondary. I won't tell you which year, otherwise it'll sort of demonstrate, that I'm part of a museum. But anyway, I do that with a nice fountain pen. I write a lot. I use 270 degrees feedback. And what is different in the way I do is I focus only on leadership behaviors. And most important, I don't take the average of competencies, the average of respondents on a particular competency and download that as a score. I take the standard deviation also because consistency of behavior is very, very important in good leadership conduct. Let's say respect for people. If my boss has filled it up and says extremely respectful, hanji kehte rehte hain, and my subordinate fills it up and says, this guy doesn't even ask me to sit down. I'm just giving an extreme dramatic. So the standard deviation obviously is very, very high, which means I'm inconsistent in my leadership behavior. I'm somewhat hypocritical. And the number one enemy of good quality is inconsistency. So the test of quality can be used as much as it can to manufacturing sector as in HR. So I use a lot of standard deviation. So my technique, to summarize, though many may not agree with this because there are people like Viktor Frankl who say, past is past. Don't worry about your script of the past. Whereas, people like Freud and others talk about the past. I'm not obsessed about the past. I try to cherry pick along with the respondent or the mentee things that could have shaped a behavior and why we need to refer back to them in order to change the script, in order to rewrite the script. So that's the sense that I do the exploration. And then I do visit the 270. I tell people not to go around with a board saying, give me feedback. No. Be very careful, get the feedback from people whom you trust, who really care for you, and don't take it too often. And once you made a change, this nice book called Atomic Habits, building up, piling up habits to make the change. Sustaining it is tough. It's something like a diet, no? We suddenly lose 8, 9 kilos, and then sustaining it is, we go for a binge, then second binge, third binge, get up a little late, skip this exercise, all that happens. So sustainability is very important.
Okay. And are there stages in mentoring that one needs to follow? Is there a best practice that that one should follow when you want to be a good or a great mentor? Are there any stages that one needs to follow?
I think the 4 stages that I think are safe. First of all is the orientation and the initiation. Building confidence in the mentee about what is the purpose, why are we sitting down here? Because if you are in an organization, I presume most of the people listening into this conversation today are from organizations and they're interested in that context. So mentees who are, especially in this remote context, are curious, they're suspicious, they're even anxious to know what is the purpose? Why are you prying into my life here? So the purpose and the breaking the ice with respect to the orientation, the initiation is extremely important. If it's developments, be honest, stay there, talk about that. The second is establishing the relationship, which is while the person is talking about the life story, without getting into a brag mode, you might want to also talk about similar episodes which you've gone through, or incidents, or how you dealt with it, and so on, or the challenges that you may be facing today. You don't want to helpless people, but where you have been successful. The third is where you're actually cultivating the relationship. You are through the mentoring program, getting deeper and deeper. It's like a spiral. You're peeling the onion layer by layer, and you're getting more and more information which is confidential. The person might turn around and say, I have not told this to anyone. In which case, you need to be even more clear that you are never going to talk about it to anyone. Anyone means anyone. You're like a locker, like a bank locker. So that's extremely important. And if at that stage you feel that the mentor and mentee relationship needs to be suspended because the mentee requires therapy, you might as well have the courage to say, not my cup of tea. You need to see a therapist. Might want to see one. If the therapist says, you don't need me, you need a mentor, you need a coach, I'm there. But where you are on borderline, where you're saying that this person could have a problem, we can't become charlatan or quack psychologists or psychiatrists. But I think a good mentor should be reading enough to understand the early signs of bipolar depression or whatever it is. And trying to deal with those is risky. And therefore, one should step back and say, I will come back to you after you see someone. And if you like, you can tell me what the person says. If you don't like, just keep it to yourself and come back when you feel better. And the fourth is the closure of the process. You should have goals about what you want to do. The jargon used by most companies is there's something called an IDP, Individual Development Plan. So you have a PDCA cycle, Plan, Do, Check, Act, which is the Schwartz cycle, which is used in statistics. You experiment with the change. You ask others whether, am I changing? The visibility of the behavior becomes better if the person's observing you on their own say, we're observing something different in you, Yogi Sriram. You've lost weight. Rather than asking them, I've tried hard, have I lost weight? So they're telling you, is better than you asking them. And that's the last stage, which is closure of the process. You can continue with the relationship for as long as it takes. Mentorship is normally longer, uh, particularly in the context of succession planning in our country, which is weak in most companies. It could be as long as 2 years. It could be, starting off with a little more close kind of relationship or close interaction, and then it could become more spaced out. So there's no hard and fast rule. But closure is very important.
Right. Right. And so when we talk about closure, I've often heard mentees complain, and mentors also get confused about it. Is it an expectation out of a mentoring relationship that the mentors will provide solutions? Because to me, that's contrary to what mentors should be doing. What do you think?
So a mentor is neither an advisor nor a policeman. There's no point of rushing to a mentor whenever you're in trouble only. If you're doing something which is important for changing your pattern of life, then you stick with the mentor through thick and thin, through rain and cloud, through sunshine or whatever it is. Second is that you don't go to that person for advice. You go to that person for, somebody asked, I'm tempted to answer that question in the chat box, the difference between counseling and mentoring. I don't want to delve on that. The similarity between both is you help a person to cope with difficult situations. Today, right from the pandemic days, we're going through really ambiguous times. Corporates don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. The geopolitical scene, all kinds of health issues in the world, the climate changes, etc., are huge. So it's extremely stressful for CEOs, extremely stressful for leaders to be in positions. And therefore, it's important for people to handhold and encourage them to think about alternatives. There's a very good article in HBR of February 2020 on elements of good judgment. Help them in making good judgments, cultivating the elements of making a good judgment, examining what you did in terms of a mistake, your learning, and so on. All that is mentoring, but it certainly is not advice.
Right. I completely agree with you. I think we are on time. It's 4:43. We can do one quick question, sir, and then we can open it up for the audience if that works for you. Are there any specific tools that you use? Like you mentioned the 270-degree. Are there any aids or any other additional things that help you get better insight into your mentees and help them with the conversations?
Some people use things like MBTI, Hogan, other psychometrics, and so on. I use a mix and match of these. I mean, if you're able to identify career derailers, which is what Hogan talks about, the 11 career derailers, or if you're able to identify a particular personality type in terms of MBTI, because all the 16 personality types are within us. I mean, we are not, neither is one better than the other. And if one person has a particular way of decision making, it's fine. But recognizing the reason for friction within a team because of personality types differing could be very useful in the mentoring process. For example, today many companies are thinking and talking about agile, not just IT companies. There are also brick and mortar companies which are talking about Scrum and different types of organization structures such as tribes and communities of practice. They're talking about a different structure which is very collaborative. So how do you use Scrum? How do you use this whole concept of having tribes working together is a challenge. So therefore, using these psychometric techniques to understand the other person. So I would say that a mentor should be really well read. You thoda mehnat to karna padega, and test the reading with the person. It's not sacrosanct that whatever you read is this gospel truth. For example, Kiersey writes a book called Please Understand Me. It's a beautiful book on MBTI, a different form of MBTI.
Temperament.
Exactly, the portraits of temperament and Please Understand Me. And so it's nice to read such stuff and to understand why the mentee is behaving in a particular way. But that aha moment which you may have by relating it to a few yellow pages in the book need not infuse an artificial sense of power. It should only be for testing and probing more.
Right. Okay. Now, thank you for sharing that. I use MBTI quite extensively because I'm a MBTI practitioner, and I took your word. I did my homework before I started doing mentoring, and
I mean, so you may refer to gifts differing, or you may refer to Please Understand Me, or type talk at work, or whatever.
Yeah, and yeah, so I agree. There are psychometric tools which are available, but like you said, one needs to be well versed with them, and you should have read about them before you actually start using them, because more than the aha moment, if you are not well versed with them, there is a tendency to then form opinions, just independently. So psychometric tools, along with the feedback that you're getting, are some of the tools that personally I use for mentoring, and it just gives you a lot more insight, just makes the conversation a lot more person oriented, and like you said, the whole feeling personality conversation really comes into place.
And my discovery has been, Rakhee, about not labeling people within the 16, but to explain the play between the second and the third letter, which is the dominant and the auxiliary function.
Right.
And how decisions are taken based on that play. That's complex and very, very useful once it's understood and explained.
Agree. Yeah, for others who are not well versed with MBTI, nothing technical here. It's just really a play between how you make your decisions, how do you take in information, and just play around that. So there's some good stuff available on MBTI that you can check online. But to be an MBTI practitioner, there is a certification that one needs to do. So let me leave it at that. But thank you so much for your time today, sir. It's been a wonderful, wonderful discussion. I've made some copious notes, and like I've told you, as and when you have time, please take me as your mentee. I think I have a long journey ahead in terms of learning how to.
The feeling is mutual.
So it'll be excellent. So we will open up the house now for questions, and I do see that there are some things that were popping up in the chat box. So let me very quickly, go right up to the top and see if there are. Okay, so let me take this one up. There is how to improve effectiveness of mentoring in online era when you don't see the person. I think it's a very good question.
I think there are some advantages also. Of course, the natural tendency is to attack the two-dimensional screen. You can see me, for example, right now, only chest upwards. You can't see how my hands are moving, how my legs are moving. Maybe there's an advantage, if I was tall, dark, and handsome, which I'm not, then you would be biased one way. So therefore, there's a sense of equity when you're doing two-dimensional digital mentoring. But on a more serious note, I think there is a disadvantage of not seeing the body language. But I think the tone of the voice, the way the eyes move, the way the person comes out on a particular day, the start of a conversation, all are telltale signs. I mean, you can be super sensitive. By the way, the most observant people in the world are children. I've noticed if you have a 4-year-old at home, she or he will notice the color of the socks of your guest, which you would have missed. They are so curious. They are so curious. And we lose it because of all the clutter as adults in our head. So the childlike curiosity of what's behind you, for example, Rakhee, is there a nice dictionary behind you or a nice book behind you? You have an interesting bookshelf, or is it just a cyber, screen?
It's my bookshelf.
I could make out, yeah. You seem to have Homer there, right? So you can take a pot shot.
You have great eyesight and great taste.
So I guess that's the art of trying to maintain and establish a relationship. It's tricky, but possible. And I guess what everybody says, I will also say, a combination of this and physical meeting is important. But I think it's interesting to ask the person. For the first time, I've heard people asking others about their hobby and stuff. And, you could get more and more curious about what sort of how do you spend your spare time? Uh, do you have a hobby which is absorbing like this one? I do scale model trains, for example. It's a great talking point. People want to know, hey, you play with trains at your age, so what? I convert analog trains into digital trains, and they scream, they hoot, they have engine sounds. I fit a decoder into their tummy, and they have a little speaker inside, and I use digital command control and control 72, no, not 72, 62 trains in my house.
Wow. Oh, okay. No, so I completely agree. I think it's like when one sense is not doing when you're not getting everything through one sense. I think the other senses need to kind of step in, and the curiosity needs to go up. And I think one of the biggest advantages that I've at least found in terms of online mentoring is it takes away the challenge of when we meet up, will the timing work for you or not? Can you travel, come down or not? The whole sense of space, geography, that's been sorted. Right now we're sitting here and talking to about 140, 150 of you, which
Yeah.
if we were to put this program together in a physical space and everybody had to come down, there would be challenges that everybody would found. But for most of us, we're sitting in the comfort of our offices or our house and doing these conversations.
I want to say
So,
one more thing. One form of mentoring in that horizontal menu which I talked about is mentoring of young students who are passing out of MBAs at school. They're
right.
very, very anxious about jobs. So group mentoring up to groups of about 8 or 9, not going overboard with 40 people and stuff, is good, which is not so easy with physical. With digital, you can see different tiles. Of course, if everybody has a good broadband, you can even use chat boxes and so on. So there are also advantages of doing group mentoring through that process.
Agree. Agree. There are some questions similar to each other. Let me just. So,
Sure.
firstly, does a mentee choose his or her mentor?
I think you can't go around interviewing mentors. It's tough. But I don't see any problem in having a conversation in order to see whether the basic values, the basic areas of interest are similar. For example, if there is domain oriented mentoring, of course you're going to talk to people who have similar kind of learning goals and thinking and so on, because it's mutual, the learning is together and so on. If it is soft skill mentoring, if it's mentoring on leadership behaviors and life changing, you'd like to know the track record of this person from others who've gone through it. You wouldn't like to waste your time. This is a very important thing. So answer to the question is you could choose your mentor, but if an organization has a system of allotting mentors, you might want to negotiate with your HR department or your leadership development department that I'd like to have a preliminary conversation to see whether we have meeting of minds and stuff, and go about it that way, because it's an investment you're making. It's an emotional investment. There's a lot of time involved. There's an opportunity cost. So I would say it's worth it. It's worth selecting one.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there are forums, for instance, the IMR YLC program, that we are using the platform for, where we've created a platform where you can actually go and choose the mentors that you want to, work with. So on forums like ours, there is an opportunity for you to go and see which are the mentors that are listed. If you think that they're the right people who will be able to guide you and will be able to bring about positive impact, then please use forums like ours where you can go and choose the mentors and then get into a mentoring relationship. Yogi sir himself is, mentoring a lot of people on the IMR YOC mentorship program. And I'm sure the people who are getting mentored by him and other senior mentors have had a, tremendous, impact in terms of the value they've got out of these conversations and the mentoring relationship they've had. So, use forums where you think you can choose. And like he said, reach out to your folks within the organization who can help you actually choose the mentors that you're looking for.
And if mentors are listening into this conversation, who are mentors, because someday a mentee could also become a mentor.
Yeah.
There is no greater satisfaction than this kind of giving. If you're changing a life, if you're making a person feel much stronger, much more self-confident, you have really done a great human's role.
Agree. There is a specific question, which is, what is mentoring to a teacher? How is it different from teaching and guiding, career counseling?
Yeah, I think in the case of teaching, you're teaching a concept. So you're, of course, in today's world, co-creating academic material. But let's say if you're teaching the Young's modulus or something like that, you're teaching a concept on the board. You're also using a presentation or PPT to teach someone a new skill. You need about 10,000 hours to teach a new skill. In the case of mentoring, it's much more to do with coping. It's much more to do with functioning at a higher level, not in terms of hierarchy, but your functioning ability, your decision-making ability at a higher level is very, very impacted. And I think in the case of teaching, it's based on outcome-based education, which is will you get a better job? Will you get a raise? Will you learn a new skill? In the case of mentoring, it's just becoming a better human being and becoming a better performer in terms of development for your own self. It's a bit like golf, you keep competing with yourself. In golf, you don't compete with anyone else.
Right. I think we'll take one or two more questions just in the interest of time. So there is a question from Vijay. How can a mentor develop confidence among the parents of underprivileged children that I mentor? And there are 60 of them.
The parents of underprivileged children.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, teaching an underprivileged child a subject like English or mathematics or music or art is the first step. And not being phony or fashionable about it. Because sometimes you could be misunderstood as a person who's condescending, who's descending into a slum for the sake of, increasing your CSR quotient. That's not the idea. You genuinely feel and you're genuinely trying to find out what is going on in this young person's mind. So I suppose genuineness cannot be put on for too long. So building trust, going out there to that person's, it's much better to go to that person's location than calling the person to a neutral place or your home. It's much better to see the environment in which that person is studying. And then also talking to the parents and, openly telling them about your intentions. And if they have a pushback or if they have concerns, addressing those. And if they have serious concerns, just back off.
Right. And the only thing I'd like to add here is, because coming from personal experience of, working with some of these children, not so much the parents, I think it's not just about mentoring to develop confidence. It is also about positive action. When people see positive action happening, the confidence automatically comes up. So when you're saying, if you, for instance, you say that we will coach and mentor your children to get better grades. And when the children start getting better grades, that action actually helps build more confidence, especially in a scenario like this. So it's not just mentoring, it is also about positive intent leading to positive action, which will build the confidence and help you get into a mentor's role in a more positive, in a stronger way.
There's this video clip that's going viral of this 19-year-old boy who's somewhere near Noida running, and there's a person in a motor car who's asking him questions. Bete, aapko ghar mein chhod do. And he's saying, I work in McDonald's the whole day and I run. I think what he's teaching the person in the motor car who has very good intentions is also the power of determination. And I would have ended that conversation saying, you've taught me a lot about what is true determination, incredible determination. So I think it's also important when we're teaching underprivileged children that you're learning from this underprivileged child to concentrate in spite of all the band, baja, noise around, and with very difficult circumstances, including poor light. So admiration, positive reinforcement, saying that I'm learning also from you is also important in this symbiotic relationship.
Right. Great. I think that's most of the questions, and I think there was just one on counseling and coaching, which you answered earlier. I don't think there are any other questions. Rajni, have I missed any questions that you might have gotten that we've not addressed?
Not many, ma'am. I'll forward it to you and so also because it's 5:02.
All right.
Probably we can.
All right, so we are on the clock. Thank you so much, Yogi sir. It's been a wonderful session. I'm going to go through this again. A good thing we've recorded this. And thank you so much for taking out time, sharing insights. I'm sure a lot of people would want to reach out to you. If you do want to reach out to Yogi sir, please get in touch with Rajni at IMA. We'll try and see what we can do and facilitate. And hopefully we'll see more of him on the IMA YLC mentorship platform. So please look out for some more sessions that we will be running in some master classes. And thank you to everybody who's joined us today. Really appreciate all of you taking out time and joining us. I hope you had a wonderful session. And thank you, Rajni, for orchestrating and putting this together. So have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Bye. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.